Hi, everyone. Hope you can hear me well. Welcome to the session on rescuing ancient grains in Ecuador. I'm really very pleased to introduce Javier Carrera, our speaker tonight. Javier is founder and social coordinator of the Red de Guardianes de Semilla, which is the Latin American Seed Guardians Network, and they are really doing groundbreaking work. He's an author and expert in regenerative food systems. He lives in Ecuador and has practiced permaculture since 1998. He also currently chairs the ALPA group and travels to connect projects of ecological and social regeneration. I'm really looking forward to his talk tonight, and I hope you all are. Please check out the other sessions that have been organized by him and his network. Thank you. Hi,
Thank you, Nina,
Javier.
very much. Welcome to you all. I am very happy to be here with you to discuss this wonderful plant, the maize, and also how are we trying to preserve it and why it's important to our culture. So, Josh, if you can begin with the presentation, please. I will tell you to move the pages on. So yeah, my name is Javier Carrera. I am the social coordinator of the Seed Guardians Network in Ecuador. And I have been working on the field of permaculture since '98. And I co-founded the network in 2002. And I don't know if we can expand it, the PDF to be like full screen. Yeah, and also pass to the first slide, please. So we're in Ecuador. We are a people of maize. I'll wait for the presentation. Yeah, we are people of maize. This image you see here is actually from a ritual in the highlands of Peru, but I really love it because it expresses how we feel about this plant. In this ritual, they put little faces on the plants that are going to be seeds afterwards as part of the ritual. So yeah, why are we people of maize? Well, it's our most important crop, and a lot of our food is based on it. Can you stop it there? Please don't move it more. No, yeah, the next one. Yeah. So the thing is, what is the origin of maize? I will go quickly through that. What you see there in the left is teosinte, which is another plant, another species related to maize. And we know today that this is the ancestor of maize. And next to it, you see one of the old maize. No, don't move it, please. Yeah, stay there. Thank you. One of the oldest kind of maize that have been found is very small. So the thing is, how did people transform this one row of grains, the teosinte, into the maize we know today? That is like a botanical miracle, and shows the deep knowledge that people had more than 10,000 years ago, like 11, 12,000 years ago, in Oaxaca, Mexico, where this transformation was made. Why the great teosinte controversy? Because for a century, scientists were discussing if teosinte is actually the ancestor of maize or not, because it seemed at the beginning like too much of a jump going from teosinte to maize, and they said it is impossible that with the little knowledge that Mexicans had in the past, that they were able to do this transformation. So they were looking for another explanation, a different kind of maybe old maize that has disappeared since. But genetics finally gave the reason to those who said that teosinte is the ancestor of maize. The funny thing is that teosinte actually means something like mother of maize in the ancient Mexican language, Nahuatl. So farmers, indigenous farmers, have always known that teosinte was the ancestor of maize, but nobody asked them because they are ignorant farmers, right? So yeah, sometimes we lose our time out of lack of respect for indigenous peoples. Then you can pass to the next one. So the adventure of maize, you see the transformation in Mesoamerica coming from the teosinte on the far left, next to the four-row maize, which is the most ancient one. And this little plant, one of the names is the Protonaltel chapalotti, came down, we don't know how, to South America, specifically the Andes. Here in the tropical Andes, where I live, in the Ecuadorial Andes, actually, in the coast, these 4 rows of grain were duplicated again to 8 rows of grain, which is very ancient, and gave way to a variety of maize that you can see here in this picture next to it. And how did they do that? Well, basically here in Ecuador, we have, I don't know, it's something, the world has something like 20 different climates, and in Ecuador we find 18 of them, which is really crazy for such a small country. So our country is comprised of hundreds of little valleys, and each valley has a different climate. You can change climate in Ecuador by walking half an hour, really. So up and down the mountains, I mean, right? So people domesticated again and again, adapted the maize to different climate conditions. And this gave way to a crazy variety of maize. And something like that also happened in the Central Andes. And we're not sure yet if the process began in the Ecuadorial Andes and then to the Central Andes of Peru and Bolivia, or the other way around, or both at the same time. Anyway, both in Peru and Bolivia and here in Ecuador and Colombia, we have a crazy diversity of maize, although they are kind of different. And then apparently these Andean maizes went back to Mexico and crossed with the maize there and gave way to the highest diversity of maize in the world, which is the Mexican one. And it went also to North America, which has a lower variety, diversity, but it has important varieties also. So after that, yeah, it expanded all over the Americas. So when Europeans first came to the Americas, they found it from Canada to Patagonia in Chile and Argentina, and from sea level up to here in my country, 3,200 meters above sea level. So it's such a variety. There's such a big diversity of this plant. It's incredible. Can we go to the next one? So maize, why is so diverse? It's because it has something that is called the jumping gene, and it means that part of the genetic material, the genomes inside of the DNA, can jump to another place inside of the genome, and this provokes mutations. This facilitates mutations. So maize is mutating all the time. And I don't know if you know about endogamy in human beings. This is very interesting. When we live in close populations and we begin to marry to people who are related to us because we live in isolation, we suffer something called genetic depression, and out of lack of genetic diversity. And this results in a lot of issues for human beings. The main one is to be very weak to all kind of diseases, like the immune systems of people who suffer of too much endogamy are very weak. And in one of the ways you can see that endogamy is in the population is because babies begin to be born with more than 5 fingers in the hand, like a 6th small finger or even a 7th one. Endogamy used to be such a big problem for human populations that all over the world, mothers instinctively, without knowing really the reason, one of the first things they do when with their newborn babies is count their fingers. In my case, I did that because I already knew about it. But when my son was born, I went immediately to count his fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, relief, Yeah, we are healthy. So, well, the interesting thing is that maize is exactly like us. It's in that sense. It needs to interbreed, to mix with other different genetic material all the time. And if you don't do that, what happens is this, you can see in the picture, is really an extreme case. It's like three maize cobs mixed together, you see. Often what you see is actually more than just 1 point. It has 2 points, 3 points, and that's the sign of endogamy. So if you start with a population of maize and never mix it, well, first of all, you have to plant at least 300 plants to be sure to have good seeds for the next generation. But even with that, if you keep planting the same population, over time, this will happen. And when this happens, people have different cultural answers to that. Here where I live in my sacred mountain, Ilalo, with the Kitucara people, what they do is they do a little game. They say it is bad luck for the one who finds this. So you have to pass your bad luck to other person, otherwise you will keep it and it's bad for you. So you try to give this to someone else. And when we were harvesting years ago maize up in the mountain, one of the ladies, the old ladies, found this, and she said to my wife, "Hey, look at this," and gave the maize. My wife was, "Well, what? Oh, this is strange," and everyone was laughing around. And they said, "You are mishada. It means you are cursed now." And my wife said, "So how do I get rid of the curse?" And they say to her, "You have to give the person who give this to you, you have to grant her her wish." So she said, "So what's your wish to the old woman?" And she said, "Oh, I want a small house, for me." So my wife went and buy in the Christmas stores a little house, a tiny house like this, and gave her, and everyone loved it. So the curse is over. But I was fascinated by this because I knew the genetic reason of this thing happening. I realized that this little game was a way for people to remember the importance of this. So I say to them, "So what does this mean?" And they say to me, "It means that the maize wants to travel." Other people say it wants to be married. So what you do then is you gather a sack of maize seed and you go to, I don't know, the next valley, your cousin, someone else who has a slightly different maize population. Like it has to be something very similar to what you have in your field, but it has to be from another place. So you bring that, another sack of grain, and you will plant, for example, 5 rows of your own seed and then 1 row of the other seed, and then 5 more rows of your own and then another row of the other. So it mixes, you see. And you have to keep doing this, like every 2, 3, 4, 5 years you have to do this, otherwise you have this endogamy situation. So because of this, maize keeps mixing all the time and showing hybrid vigor. It means when you mix two different populations, you are creating a hybrid. That's what you do. You mix two different populations and you create a hybrid. So maize is actually an eternal hybrid. Okay, people have been trying to classify maize for more than a century, and it's impossible. It's really impossible because the moment you pin down a variety, a landrace of maize, and you go back to the field to look for it, and it doesn't exist anymore. It's already mixing up with other populations. So what you have in maize is like genetic lines, like tendencies, like a color or texture, but people are all the time mixing them. So can you pass to the next one, please? Next slide. Yeah, maize is impossible to classify. You see here in the little town of Cotacachi, and this indigenous town in the north of Ecuador, the picture to the left. This is the harvest of one woman, and these plants are getting mixed all the time. Then we have three from my sacred mountain. They are different varieties according to people, but these pictures were taken, I think it was 2004 or 5, and in the following years, the first one to up there kind of disappeared. It's actually mixing with the others, all the time. and you see the beautiful colors there. And this is typical Ecuadorian maize. It tends to be small, but the grain is roundish, thick, very thick and heavy. Compared, for example, with the Peruvian maize, which tends to be bigger but more fluffy on the inside, fuller of air. So yeah, these populations are all the time mixing. So I came to realize that what indigenous people is telling me when I ask them which is the variety, they are getting factors like the color, the size of the grain, things like that. But they know they are mixing all the time. These are not fixed land races. Yeah, let's get to the next one. So how do we cultivate maize? Yeah, this is a bonus. This is very ancient. We call them dressed or clothed maize, maize tunicado. And in this variety, every grain has its own coverage. Instead of the whole cob being covered by leaves, every little grain has its own leaf coverage. Let's go to the next one. So how do we cultivate maize? This now is being called the milpa system, out of the name that the Mexicans give to this system. It's also known as the Three Sisters system, out of the name that indigenous people on the southwest of the United States gives it. But actually, this is the common system all over the Americas. From Canada to Argentina, this was the way that people used to cultivate maize, and it is very common in my country. So maize is never one crop. It's always part of a system that includes beans, what we call, I think, pole beans, meaning climbing beans, beans that will climb in the plant, and squash. We have two different kinds of squash. One type, the cucurbita maxima, is very common in the lowlands, and another kind, the cucurbita fisifolia, is very common here in the highlands where I live. So the purpose of the beans is to provide nitrogen to the soil and to the diet, because maize is carbohydrate, right? And the purpose of a squash is to cover the soil, keeping humidity, creating an ecosystem there, and stopping the spread of weeds, and also providing with the vegetable part of the diet. So here you have a complete diet, kind of. It's not a very rich one, but this the basics for survival. You have protein in the beans, you have the carbohydrates in the maize, and the vegetables in the squash, including the squash flowers and all that. Then there's also an invading fungus that sometimes destroy the corn cobs, but it's considered in Mexico a delicacy. This mushroom that grows there. So this is the system that we have. Is a wonderful system, and obviously you produce far more food per square meter than in a monocrop. Yeah, let's go to the next one. Now we are going to discuss the types and uses. Here you can see some of the different varieties that we have, and I will discuss the different uses. Now that I see the black one, do you see the black one up there? There's another use I was forgetting. I will remember. So next slide, please. Some of the different foods we prepare with it. I will talk about them in the next slide. Give me just a second. Yeah, I have it here. So I'm opening in my phone so I can look at it closer. So we have different kinds of maize and different uses for it. One of the most common ones is the soft grain maize, and this only grows in the highlands. Highlands is above 2,000 meters above sea level. So it's a temperate region, actually. It's not the cold part of the country. The cold part of the country is about 4,000 meters above sea level. So this maize, the soft one, it takes longer to grow. It grows in 8 to 10 months, and it's the only one that produces very soft grain. So we begin, and it has the biggest diversity of our maize varieties. Most of the maize I have been showing you here are soft grains. So first we eat them after 6 months, 5 to 6 months. They are tender, immature. We call them choclo, and we do a bunch of things with it. Like the most simple one is just to cook it in water with salt, a little butter, and cheese, and it's delicious. That's choclo con queso, choclo with cheese. But we can also make like puree, like mashing the choclo and mixing it with things like onions, or we can make a sugary version with molasses, and that's called humita or choclotanda, which actually means maize bread. And it used to be fermented in the past, and it used to be very popular, like everywhere in the highlands. You could find this thing, especially in the tender maize season in the immature state. You can also put this in soups. It's very common to put it in soups, in stews, and also to use as fillings for other things like empanadas, the patties we do here with different materials. Then it keeps on mature in the process of becoming more mature, and it has a semi-mature state called cow, and we do other dishes with it, including soups and others. And then when it's dry, completely dry, we harvest it in August. And there are other things that open there. Like, for example, the most simple one is tostado. I looked for the translation, it was parched, meaning we put it either in oil or in a big open clay pot. And we cook it until it bursts open, which is not popcorn, it's something different. If we could go back, please, one slide. Is the picture in the upper right corner. You are looking at this parched corn with a leguminous plant we love here called chocho or tarwi, Lupinus mutabilis. So this is also like a very popular dish. It's like for eating on the road while walking, and it has carbohydrates and proteins. It's very rich. Let's go back to the other one. So yeah, we have also the flour. We make flour, like we grind it to produce a flour that is typically used for tortillas. Let's go back again. maybe we're still in the pictures for the while. Okay, so tortillas are in the lower left corner. You see, those are very simple tortillas made out with maize flour, and they are delicious. Like, believe me, like, yeah, they are incredible. Yeah, and the humitas, the cornbread I was telling you about, are in the lower right corner, and it's very nice because we cook them inside of maize leaves, and this gives a special flavor. And the darker the leaves are, the stronger the flavor is. What else do we have? We can use the maize flour to make bread mixing with wheat, and we can also prepare different kinds of desserts with it, including the things you see in the upper left picture. The little clay pot on the upper side that is called champús, which is very little fermentation, is a sweet, thick beverage. It's not really for drinking. You eat it with a spoon, but well, you can also kind of drink it. It is very heavy. So yeah, let's go back to the list. Another thing I don't have a picture for is dehydrated, which is called chuchuca. So you can kind of break this maize and cook it and then dry it, and it stores for a very long time, like years. And you have to rehydrate that, and then you can use it to thicken up soups. And then we have maybe the most important of them all. Not now, but in the ancient cultures, yes, is chicha, corn beer. Asua is actually the name in Quechua. Chicha is a common name in the Americas, derived from the Caribbean ancestral languages. So what is a chicha? Chicha is kind of like a beer. It's very thick, and you can do it with several techniques. The one I like the most is jora, which is first we soak the grain in water so it begins to sprout. Then we leave it to sprout in the dark, and when it has the sprouts growing there, we go back and cook it. Well, mash it, then cook it, then leave it to ferment in clay pots. And you can add things like aromatic herbs or fruits to give it different flavors. It is bubbly. It is delicious, like, really. Um, I prefer it very much more than commercial pasteurized beer, like normal beer. This is far better. But there used to be another way of doing it that it has been forbidden now, and women used to mash it in their mouths and then spit it out. Not all of it. Like most of it was just mashed, but a part of it will be like chewed and then spit into the mixture for it to accelerate fermentation. In the Amazon lowlands, people still do this with maize and cassava and other things, but here in the highlands, you don't find it anymore. Especially dangerous in times of COVID, right? Yeah. So yeah, those all these things you do with soft maize. But then we have other kinds of maize, like the semi-soft, which is common in the lowlands. You can grind it and cook it for a long time, and you can make other kinds of tortillas with it. It is a very nice, easy growing. The maize in the lowlands, it only needs 4 months to grow, but it is definitely harder. It is not. You cannot find soft maize really in the lowlands, but it grows faster. Then we have chulpi, which is a highlands maize, and this the only thing we do with it is parch it, like roast it, and it's the softer one. You can see the difference with the typical soft maize. This is a different variety and gives up a very soft kind of parch maize. Then we have another one which is very important, mote. In Mexico, it's called nixtamal. Maybe you have heard about that name. Here we call it mote. In Peru is muti, I think. And the thing with mote is that maize is less nutritious than, for example, rice or wheat, because it has an essential amino acid, lysine, locked in a way that our bodies cannot absorb. So when you base your diet on maize, you have the risk of developing a degenerative disease called pellagra, and sadly, this is quite common in Africa, in the regions where people base their diets on maize, but they don't know about mote. So what is mote? Mote, basically, you take maize and cook it for a long time, typically overnight, in the presence of ashes, meaning that you actually boil the grain with ashes, good ashes. You put ashes on the boiling, and this boiling with ashes will free the lysine to a form that is available for human nutrition. So you see, this is very important. And when you go to Mexico, all these tortillas you will eat in Mexico are basically done with this, with mote. Um, Here we do the process in this way. We first boil the maize with good ashes, then we clean it and peel it in running water, meaning that you put it in like in a stream, in a basket, and then you take it out, and now it's like colder, and you can rub it with your hands, and the outer peeling of the grain goes away. And then you can spread it in the sun or in the shade to dry. And when it's completely dry, you can store this for 1, 2, 3 years, no problem. Well, 1 to 2 years is most common. And then you can cook it again until it's completely cooked. So you can have a storage of this for the long run, right? Or, well, you can just finish cooking immediately and serve. No, you can do mote with soft maize too, but there are some especially well-liked varieties for this. Like, for example, in the south of Ecuador, it's a white, big grain, while here in the northern highlands where I live is a smaller yellow grain. But both of them are preferred for mote. In Ecuador, we do different things. Like, we actually love about the people in the southern highlands, calling them mote eaters, because that's what they eat, like, all the time. They eat tons of that. Mote is the base of their diets, but here in the highlands too, we do different things, including beverage, sweets. The most simple one is you can, like, have a fried egg with mote. You mix it well, and you end up with this mote pillo is the name. Next we have canguil, which is the name we give to popcorn, and that, how to do what to do with that, right? You just have to roast it, and it pops open. And then we have another very interesting one called morocho, and this is very specific of the northern Andes. It's a kind of maize that looks like marbled in the outside. The grains are big, and it is so hard that when you try to grind it, it is very difficult to produce flour with it. You produce, like, just broken grain, and you have to cook it for a long time. And we use it in salty things, like, say, like soups, but also a very typical thing is to cook it with milk and molasses, and this is a preferred children food. Morocho is considered to be the most nutritious form of maize by people. So they say that if you give this to children, they will grow up to be strong. And also we make empanadas, patties with morocho, with minced meat inside, and that is mind-blowing. It's one of the most delicious things we can do with maize here. And finally, we have morochillo, which is a smaller kind of harder of morocho, and hard maize. And this is cultivated just for poultry feed. So those are the uses we have for maize. Can you go to the next one, please? Let's talk about the sad part. Yeah. In the 60s, the government made a survey of the different land races of maize in Ecuador. They found around 300 main land races of maize, with tendencies inside, as I was telling you. Right now, for the last 18 years, our network has been trying to found these land races. We have actually found only 50. 50 out of 300. So this is very bad. Local land races are disappearing very fast, and people are cultivating more and more hybrid kinds of maize for the industry. Here we have some examples of ancestral varieties of maize. Like in the lower left, you see a mixture of different things, but of special interest is the long pale one in the middle, because that's an 8-row maize. Like, it has only 8 rows of grain, and that means it is very, very ancient. It can have more than, I don't know, 5,000 years existing here. In the upper left, you see a kind of soft maize, a very good grain. It is a big cob, and this is the only one of its kind we have found living at 3,200 meters above sea level, an adaptation to the cold. The small one to its right, I don't know, it's just beautiful. It's so small, but we don't want it to disappear. And the last one in the lower right is called tusilla, or flimsy cob. And tostilla is maybe the most important of all this. It's a maize, a semi-soft maize. You can make tortillas with it, and it grows at sea level and in very dry conditions. It doesn't like water, and it doesn't like fertilization. And it produces 2 to 5 cobs per plant, which is a very high rate. How did they manage to create this? I don't really know. One more thing, one more variety that is important is not here because we don't have a picture. It doesn't exist anymore. There used to be, it was called Maize de Puerto Viejo, a landrace in the coast of Ecuador, which was the most famous Ecuadorian maize. The plant was 3 to 5 meters high. Imagine that. And it produced a semi-soft maize of very big cobs. And it was the preferred maize for making tortillas for sailors. So ships coming in the colonial ages from Peru, from Lima, towards Mexico will stop in the Ecuadorian coast to buy tons of these tortillas for the trip. And we don't have that maize anymore. And that is really, really sad. Yeah, let's go to the next one. So maize for us is part of our ancestral seeds campaign. Our network covers most of the country, and we are basically farmers who do permaculture and regenerative agriculture. And we have been busy rescuing old plants for 18 years already. Maize is just one of it. Here I can show you others, like for example, in the upper left, you see Cana indica, Achira. Its roots, you can see the roots in very little, the picture is little, but you can see the roots there. They produce the best starch of the vegetable kingdom. And also you can eat you can eat the roots, but you can also eat the parts coming out of the roots to form the stem. And you can also use the leaves to grab food. We do that. We love to make food wrapped in these leaves. But people in Ecuador now just ignore that you can eat the roots. It is one of the most ancient crops in Ecuador. It has something like 8,000, I think, years of cultivation, but now nobody knows about the roots. They only know that the leaves can be used for wrapping up food. Next, we have cacao, to make chocolate. And why it's there? Because Ecuador is the center of domestication of cacao. It was first domesticated here, and here you can find unique varieties of fine aroma cacao that you will not find anywhere else. They have been trying to replicate in other places, but it's something about the equatorial sunlight and the volcanic soils and the genetic diversity that makes Ecuadorian cacao unique. So you may know about this already. So what it is in our seed rescue campaign, because it's actually endangered. The hybrid cacao populations are contaminating the ancestral varieties very easily, and the government is protecting the hybrid varieties, the modern hybrids, and not protecting the ancestral ones. So we are in the danger of losing these ancestral populations of fine aroma cacao. Next, we have our native potatoes. They are different from the Peruvian and Chilean potatoes. These potatoes grow faster, last shorter times, like they will begin to sprout after 2-3 days out of the ground, and they are delicious. And they also need protection because now everyone is cultivating just a couple kinds of big potatoes, Next, we have the agave plant, this cactus-like thing. And the agave plant came from Mexico too, like 5,000 years ago. And it was central to the culture of the highlands. And it's a plant that gives you so many things like building materials for making ropes and shoes. But the food we get out of it is especially its sap. The sap can be eaten raw or cooked and then fermented, a chicha too. And it's so rich in nutrients that we call it a drinkable food. Yeah, it's like you are eating. It's not just a drink, but is a drinkable food. Next, we have a palm tree. You see there, chonta palm, Bactris gasipaes, and this is the food and bread of the Amazon. You know, it produces a fruit, the chontaduro, that you can just cook with salt, or you can do a lot of other things with it. And it produces this palm in a mixed food forest will produce more calories than maize per acre. And you have to plant a lot of other things in the same acre. So the total food production is higher than any grain crop. Well, the other one, this is the leaves you see there are part of a crop of lierén, which is a root that has been almost forgotten in Ecuador. The special thing about it is that it grows in the shade of big tropical fruit trees. And then I have a picture of two kinds of highlands papaya. You know papayas, right? Carica papaya, the pawpaw. Well, we are also in the place of origin of papaya here in Ecuador, and we have like 14 different species related to the papaya that are edible, and each one is different and delicious. So all these things are being forgotten by the population, and we came to realize in our network that if people don't use these plants, if we don't sell these seeds, then they will disappear. So putting them back on people's plates are the most important strategy we can do. Let's go to the next one, please. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. This is part of the Ancestral Seeds campaign. So we are trying to rescue ancestral knowledge, like the woman you see there in the seed market in Cotacachi. She's an indigenous Quechua woman with all the variety of things she produces at her home. And then up from here, you can see a group of chefs. These are young chefs. Some of them are among the most famous chefs in Ecuador. And they have been working for us for the last 2 years, developing a new culinary knowledge with ancestral roots. Like, for example, to the right of them, what you see there is humita. You remember the corn bread, but made with grinded fine aroma cacao, which is something new. Like, we know humitas for thousands of years, but chocolate humitas, that's new. And behind of the humita, you can see an ice cream that is pure cacao fruit juice. Because when we ferment the cacao to produce chocolate, we discard the juice. So the juice in the industry goes nowhere. But in our case, we keep this juice and just put it in the refrigerator with no added sugars. And believe me, it's the most mind-blowing thing ever. If you let it sit for a couple of days and it ferments a little, it becomes bubbly. That is the nectar of the gods. There's no beverage better than that in the world. I'm serious. So our friend, the chef Esteban Tapia, he made an ice cream out of that, like a sorbet actually, without milk. And it was delicious. All that is on top of a bed of just roasted cacao grains. And the guy in the left, he is fermenting cacao. He is the producer of the cacao that went in this. So yeah, let's go to the next one, please. So let's talk a little about the future of maize. You see one of us there. This is a portrait of me, a people of maize, or any other Ecuadorian. Right now, Ecuador is importing maize, but only of the hard kind, and is destined for poultry feed. The local consumption, like human consumption of maize in Ecuador, is still based on small farmers' production, mainly of ancestral varieties. So that's the good news. The bad news is that the industry is pushing for more consumption of industrialized foods made out with the grown kinds of maize. And they are also trying to push the country to open doors to transgenics. And we know that the ones trying to open the country for transgenics are actually the big maize producers of the coast. And they are the only ones that will benefit out of it. The rest of the people know that it's a bad thing, but they will be able to use less money, on fumigation of chemicals if they use transgenic crops. So they are the ones pushing for that. And we know that if this comes to happen, maize will contaminate, the transgenic maize will contaminate the rest of the country. We are a small country. And maize pollen can blow downwind to 200 kilometers, very long range. So that's why we have been fighting against this for a long time already. And trying to keep our land races and the knowledge of how to cultivate. We have produced, for example, a short documentary to be shown on TV about the different cultural uses of maize. And we have workshops opening all the time. The 26th of January, we'll be opening a permanent portal of education where people can take courses for a very low rate. Low money, but high quality. And we will be giving like scholarships for farmers and indigenous peoples for them to be able to join these courses. So we are trying different strategies to inform the population about these things. Also, we are using social networks. So we have around 30,000 followers on Facebook. But our publications on Facebook, our posts that are educational, for example, recipes and things like that, we reach in last year, 2020, we reached, it was 1,300,000 people with these posts. So we realized that these communicational strategies are very, very important right now to help people realize we have to protect these things. But in the end, it comes down to this. I will tell you a story. Some years ago, we made a study in the south of Ecuador in a part that is very dry and very poor, Paletillas, in the province of Loja. And what we did was we sat down with around 50 farmers to discuss the production prices of their monocrop corn, maize. So they put everything that they have to pay: the seed, the chemicals, the tractor, even the sacks and the cord to tie up the sacks. Everything went there. And then we compared that to the earnings out of each acre of maize. And they realized they were earning, believe me, $90 per acre per year. After destroying the land and contaminating their health, they were only getting that, $80 per acre. We made the same calculation for organic ancestral maize, and the earnings were 5 times that number, far more money, because you sell the squash and the beans, and because organic maize sells better in the market, and because they will not be selling for the poultry industry, but for human consumption, which gets better prices. So the question then is, why are they cultivating monocrop hard maize for the poultry industry and not these other organic maize, ancestral seeds for human consumption? Well, the answer is the only way of commercialization for them is this little truck that comes every year from the main poultry producer of the country and buys them the maize, meaning that the market is imposing what they cultivate. So they were very sad because some of them, especially the young ones, never made this calculation before, and they didn't realize how bad the business was. And I remember a guy who said, "So why this is why we are poor? Shit, we never realized before." And they say they have no access to the market, so they cannot produce organic maize and sell it. I will pass to the last one, please. This is just to say thank you, and I will be back with you. Can we pass to the last slide? Yeah, if you want to contact me, I will keep talking, but I want, if you want to copy the addresses, you can do it there. So we told them, you need to organize, because there are markets for this. You know, if you go to the city of Loja, 2 hours from here, or Cuenca, 4 hours from here, you will find market. The problem, they say, is we don't organize. We don't have this tradition of organizing. They were not indigenous peoples, you know. They were, we call them colonizers in the south of the country. But I realized that their wives, they were already discussing among themselves. And I went out of this research with hope that they will push their husbands to organize and yeah, find a way. But then we have the loss, because this lack of access to the market, it is created, it is designed, it is part of the system, you know, a system of colonialism that has been pushing people into poverty and always fixing the game for the big industry. And we're trying to fight back. Right now, we have a constitutional case accepted in the Constitutional Court against the current law of seeds. And we have 2 other cases building up for laws that affect the whole food system. I'm sad to tell you that the main reason we have these new laws that are imposing crazy things on farmers is the signing of the treaty of free trade agreement with the European Union. Since we signed that treaty, our government is pushing for a lot of regulations that doesn't make sense for our economical reality or for our cultural identity. So our organization, the Seed Guardians Network, along others that are working with us on this, we are trying to push back, to fight back. But it is difficult, you know. And I believe that we really need to connect across borders and across continents, and keep a dialogue open. You need to realize what is happening here, and we need to realize and understand what is happening up there, and how you're trying to fight back to this industrial system. I think that only by connecting with each other and understanding our different realities, we can build the narratives that will fuel up the fight for a better food system. So this is basically it. We will keep fighting. We are people of maize. If we lose our maize, we lose more than our identity. We lose the whole thing of food sovereignty, you know. So now I'm open to questions from your part, and also we have like 5 minutes or something like that. We can make a follow-up session if you want to, but you have to write in the chat if you want to. So because if there's no one, I will not be sitting there alone, obviously. So if you want to join me in the follow-up session, it's up to you, please. So, Nina, thank you for helping us.
Yeah. Yeah, Javier, there is a few questions, so I'm just going to pose them to you. So we've got a question from Mark. Given that all maize currently grown in the UK has been specifically bred to northwestern European climatic conditions, does anyone know if any ancient maize varieties are likely to thrive in the UK without significant global warming?
Well, maize is the most adaptable of all the crops that humans have domesticated. So who knows what we can create in the future, but not by genetic engineering, by just doing the mixing, you know. So, but one important thing is that our soft corns of soft maize needs the long growing season, you know, 8 months. Otherwise, it will not be so soft. So for that, there's a definitive barrier for you, because you will never have 8 months of warmth like here. So there are limitations. On the other hand, yeah, maize is part of our culture, maybe not so much of yours, but there are other things that are part of your culture, and you should be trying really to rescue, like ancient varieties of wheat, for example. Yeah.
Thanks. And so then we have a question from Helena. She says that you've talked about this in the talk, but maybe you can expand. What about the nutrition in maize? So could you say something more about it, particularly to do with the alkaline solutions that sometimes are used in order to prepare it to prevent the potential disease, nutrition deficiency you talked about?
Yeah, the alkaline substances. I know that alkaline earth, calcium earth, I don't remember the name in English, is used, but my people believes that this doesn't work well for human health and that we should use good ashes. That's how we traditionally do it. So, but let's say that right now we mote, the nixtamal, is just one part of our maize consumption. We don't depend on it because we eat other things too. Like right now, we eat rice, we eat wheat, we eat a lot of other things that give us a balance. Another important thing is that in Ecuador, and maybe it's different in Peru and Bolivia, but in Ecuador, we were never dependent on maize. Maize was a nice complementary food, very important because it was the one that we could keep for a long time. You understand? We could store it. But Ecuadorian diet in pre-Incan times was very diverse with high levels of consumption of animal foodstuffs. So nutrition was never really a problem. And that's why I think that mote, even if it's part of our culture, is not as central for us as it is, for example, in Mexico, where it's really, really main thing, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then there was a question on food forests. Could you talk a little bit more about how they help to supply all the food in your community?
Well, food forests was well, managed landscapes, managed ecosystems was the way of producing food in Ecuador, and it was different in the coastal lowlands, in the highlands, and in the Amazon. Where I live, we have completely lost the tradition of food forest, and my organization is trying to recreate. Like we have made a catalog of the different plants we can cultivate here, because it's temperate. But one thing we know is that a tree bean called Erythrina edulis was probably the main crop there. It is a bean that grows up to, well, the tree grows 6 meters high and is very easy to cultivate and is delicious. It's like the best bean in the world. And we're trying to expand the cultivation of that right now. In the Amazon, that's the real land of the big food forests. And there's people alive today who still know and remember how you do that. Like, and the tale is fascinating. It's very simple. The technique to produce the food forest is so simple, it's mind blowing. And but chonta palm was like the centerpiece of it, along with a lot of other things. And you end up cultivating so much food in the food forest that you realize it's not designed just for human consumption. It's designed to feed a lot of wildlife too. And these food forests become gardens where trapping and hunting animals is really easy, you know. And people have to do it because you have blooming animal populations. And that's the reason why we never domesticated animals here. That's the final reason, because it is so difficult to take care of cows. I have done it too, you know, it's really difficult compared to just going out with your blog and yeah, you know, I know it's not easy for you to understand, but yeah, a monkey is delicious. It's true. It's so delicious that, you know, the best parts are the hands. So if you go to indigenous communities in the Amazon rainforest, you will see the little children eating the hands of the monkeys. For me, even for me, it's difficult. Yeah.
We have more questions. Javier, I'm not sure how much time we have left, but
I think it's less than a minute now.
yeah. So
extend the
one last question: why isn't the government protecting the ancestral varieties of cacao, and what can be done to make that happen?
Because they don't give a shit about it. The government officials that manage agriculture, they are more interested in producing new varieties of hybrid cacao to work with agrochemicals, because the influence of the agrochemical companies like Bayer, Monsanto in Ecuador is huge. Like they sit in the government basically, and they do whatever they want. And fine aroma cacao, even if it has grown and we already have the best chocolate in the world with gold prices and all that, it's still a smaller industry. when compared to these big exporters for the candy makers in the global north. So yeah, but society needs to push back because otherwise the whole planet will lose the genetic diversity of cacao. That's what is at stake. No other country has this diversity.
Yeah.
So what do we do? Is there a link in the chat or something so we can move
Yeah.
there?
So there is a couple of people that are that might join us in a follow-on Zoom session. There's a few more questions that people asked. I don't know. We could possibly I can copy them and we could possibly address them then. But I don't know how it actually happens.
I can move to the extended session, but I have a problem with the chat. I don't see the link in the chat. Can someone send me the link by WhatsApp?
Yeah, there is I will do that, Javier. I will do that. So let's say goodbye now to our big audience, and there is a chat that I'm going to copy to you, especially if this stays open for a couple more minutes. And thank you so much, Javier. It was super interesting, and thanks a lot for your work.
And thank you, Nina, and thank you all for listening. See you there.
All the best. Bye-bye.